The Predator at Midnight. It was an ordinary evening. Sophie's brother had a few friends over, and they decided to get pizza from a well-known pizza chain in Arizona called Fired Pie. They had to bring along their husky puppy, Frosty, since he was still too mischievous to be left home alone. When they arrived, Sophie didn't feel like getting out of the car. She was feeling lazy. Her brother didn't want to leave her alone outside, but since Frosty couldn't go inside the restaurant, he stayed in the car with Sophie. The parking lot was pitch dark. Sophie sat in the back seat, nearly lying down as she scrolled through her phone. As she relaxed, Frosty began whining and barking, an unusual reaction that confused Sophie. At first, she assumed he was just restless from being stuck in the car, so she gently patted him to calm him down. But Frosty's barking grew more aggressive, and Sophie froze when she caught something in the reflection of the rearview mirror. A man in a black hoodie and mask, staring directly at her. Terrified, Sophie screamed and turned to face the man, who was trying to open the car door. The doors were locked, but he shouted at her, demanding she open them. Frozen in fear, 14-year-old Sophie didn't know what to do. Frosty stomped on her as he barked furiously at the man, snapping Sophie back to reality if she didn't act fast. Something terrible was going to happen. Sophie mustered the courage to react. In a moment of panic, she told the man to leave and threatened to call the police if he didn't. A strange silence followed, making Sophie believe the man had left. As she looked around, she saw nothing. No one was there. So she decided to get out of the car and run toward the restaurant, with Frosty by her side. However, as Sophie ran toward the restaurant, someone grabbed her from behind, covering her mouth with a cloth. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Frosty bolting toward the restaurant, barking frantically. Then, Sophie lost consciousness. Later, Sophie woke up in a hospital bed, her body aching and disoriented, as if she had been tossed around. Sophie looked around and saw her mother and brother, both visibly worried. She asked them what had happened and learned that Frosty was the hero that night. They told her that Frosty had run to the restaurant entrance, catching the attention of the staff. As Frosty barked and drew attention, Sophie's brother sensed that something was wrong and rushed toward the parking lot. Upon reaching the parking lot and not seeing Sophie inside, he immediately began calling the police. Then, once again, Frosty barked at something. Seeing Frosty's urgency, he followed the dog. Frosty sniffed around and led him to a suspicious-looking truck parked nearby. Her brother walked around the vehicle to look inside and saw blood on the back door of the truck. Inside, he saw Sophie tied up with rope and gagged. Suddenly, the attacker emerged from around the truck, holding a knife. Frosty barked fiercely, once again warning him of the danger. Danger was imminent. He turned just in time to see the man charging at him with a blood-stained knife. In a desperate attempt to protect his sister, Sophie's brother lunged at the attacker. Nearby witnesses saw the struggle and rushed in, helping him subdue the man and take the knife away. After everything, the investigation revealed that the man was a human trafficker. He had likely planned to kidnap and sell Sophie, but Frosty's bravery and loyalty had saved her life. Though Sophie was physically unharmed, the trauma of the event haunted her for weeks. She couldn't shake the fear of what could have happened if Frosty hadn't been there. Mysterious invitation in the basement. The warm afternoon sun spread across the school campus as the students left for the day. I remember it like it was yesterday. Everything seemed normal, but there was something different about that week. That was the week Justin arrived. He was a new student, showing up in the middle of the semester without warning. He was quiet, maybe a little strange, but friendly enough. He sat next to me in class because there happened to be an empty seat, and soon enough, we started talking. Justin always seemed distant, like he was hiding something and rarely talked about himself. He just said he had recently moved to our town. There was something odd about him, but I brushed it aside. I thought everyone had their quirks. A few weeks later, he invited me over to his house. I was a bit surprised by this. He told me to come around 7 p.m. I wasn't particularly excited, but I agreed. After all, he was new to town, and I thought he could use a friend. That night, I took a bus to his neighborhood and started walking to find Justin's house. His home was in a rundown area. The houses were small, and the streets were eerily quiet. The porch light was off when I arrived, and the windows were dark. I texted Justin to let him know I was there. After a minute with no reply, I moved closer to the front door. It was unlocked. I paused for a moment, then pushed the door open. Inside, it was almost pitch black. The house was silent, except for a faint noise coming from somewhere deep inside. I stood at the entrance, calling out for Justin, but there was no answer. My phone buzzed, and finally, he responded, "Come in. I'm in the basement." I went down the basement stairs. The sound of a TV or video game echoed from the basement. The basement door was slightly ajar, and the noise grew louder as I approached. I figured Justin was playing something. The basement was darker than the rest of the house, with just a faint light flickering. As I descended, the sounds of gunfire and explosions became clearer, but something felt wrong. I called out to Justin again, but the only answer I got was the echo of my own voice. At the bottom of the stairs, I hesitated. It was pitch black, except for the flicker of a TV somewhere in the distance. I moved forward, inching through the darkness, toward the faint light. I called out again, louder this time, "Justin," but still nothing. Suddenly, I felt it, a hard shove from behind. I stumbled and hit the ground face first. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and I lay there for a moment, stunned. Laughter echoed through the basement. I staggered to my feet, my heart racing. I turned, trying to see who had pushed me, but the darkness swallowed everything. Then came another shove, harder this time, sending me sprawling to the floor again. The laughter started up once more. It felt like I was being toyed with. Panic hit me. My legs were trembling. Someone kicked my legs as I tried to stand, knocking me down again. I had to get out now. I sprinted toward the stairs, my feet slipping on the slick concrete floor. My heart pounded in my chest. Footsteps echoed behind me, and the laughter still rang in my ears. My hands fumbled in the dark, desperately searching for the railing. My foot caught on the bottom step, and I stumbled, but I managed to catch myself. I burst through the front door and ran. When I got home, I texted Justin, wanting to know what the hell had just happened, but he never responded. The next day at school, I expected him to show up and either laugh it off or offer an explanation. But Justin didn't say a word. He sat there, silent, avoiding my gaze. Then, one Monday, he was gone. His desk was empty, with no books or belongings. There were rumors that he had moved away, but no one seemed to care. But I did. I couldn't stop thinking about that night. In my mind, I kept replaying the moment I was shoved and the laughter that followed me. It felt like I was being hunted. I still wondered if it had been Justin or someone else down there with me. And then I remembered something I had overlooked in the chaos. When I first entered the basement, there were more footsteps than just mine. I didn't dare go back to Justin's house after that day. I'm glad I escaped that house. I know that some mysteries are better left unsolved and without knowing, but the questions I wonder still haunt me and push me to find them. I don't know if I should. Haunting scars. I used to live in a small house near a large town. Every morning I would read the newspaper as part of my routine. One day, an article caught my attention. A man from our town had been missing for almost 4 months. The article described a distinctive scar, a large one running from his left ear, across his mouth, to his right ear. The description felt eerily familiar, like something from a horror movie I'd seen before. A few months later, news broke that another man had been found murdered not far from our home. The police began investigating, but despite all efforts, they couldn't find any leads or evidence. The events made me anxious, but over time, I tried to push my fears aside and carry on with my normal life. A few weeks later, one night, I was getting ready for bed. I was the only one in the house with a bedroom on the ground floor. My habit was to leave the window open, as I often got too hot at night. Exhausted from the day, I quickly fell asleep. A loud noise suddenly woke me up, a sound like something had been thrown against the wall near the window. My bed was positioned right in front of the window, so the sound was especially loud and alarming. The black curtains blocked my view, leaving me in a dark cloud of anxiety. I uneasily strained to listen for any sound. Then, a chilling dripping sound caught my attention. It was coming from the window, dripping onto the floor. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone to turn on the flashlight. The beam revealed a horrifying sight. Blood was dripping from the window onto the floor below. I hesitated for a moment, then pulled the curtains aside. The scene before my eyes was horrifying. A knife, covered in fresh blood, lay on the windowsill. Outside, shrouded in darkness, stood a figure. Although I couldn't see his face clearly, the scar was unmistakable. It was the man who had been missing for months. He stood there, staring at me with empty eyes. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized the man's scar was freshly cut, blood dripping down his face. He didn't move toward me. He just stood there, strangely still and expressionless. Panic surged through me. I rushed toward my father's room, my heart pounding so hard that I could barely hear anything else. The figure outside remained still, his gaze fixed on me. My mind raced. What was he waiting for? Why was he doing this? What did he intend? As I reached my father's door, I turned for one last look. The scarred man was still outside the window, his face a horrifying mask of pain and malice. I could see him through the gap in the curtain. He still hadn't moved. Finally, I entered my father's room and told him everything. The bloodstains were still visible on the windowsill, the knife gleaming ominously. My father, alarmed, immediately picked up the phone and dialed 911. They rushed to the window, but the man was already gone. The police searched around the house, their flashlights sweeping every corner, but they found no sign of the scarred man. They assured us that they would continue investigating, but their reassurances did little to calm the fear that surged inside me. The figure outside had vanished. The darkness was now still and silent, but the horror lingered. The scarred stranger had come so close, and his intentions remained shrouded in mystery. The man passed through the door. It was a quiet evening. Abby was home alone as usual. Her mother often had to work 2 jobs in one day, from morning to late at night. So Abby had to take care of herself most of the time, and she was used to it. The house was peaceful. Her mother wouldn't be home for hours, so she took care of everything herself, from cooking to locking up, getting ready for bed. Before going to bed, Abby planned to relax a bit. She sat on the couch, ready to watch TV with a tub of ice cream in her hand. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. She froze, spoon of ice cream halfway to her mouth. It was strange her friends never visited this late, and her mom always used her key. Confused, she slowly walked to the door. She wasn't exactly scared, just curious. She opened the door and saw him, a man. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking on. He was bald, wore thick glasses, and had a scruffy beard with dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't seem threatening, but something felt off. Abby greeted him, and the man smiled and asked, "Hello, little girl. Are your parents home?" At the time, she didn't think much of it, assuming it was just a friendly question. So Abby foolishly answered that her mom wasn't home. A smile spread across his face, but then she started to feel uneasy as his questions grew too interested. He smiled and said, "Good night. Don't get into any trouble," then walked away. Abby didn't understand what had just happened, so she closed the door. Her heart was racing, but she pushed it aside. He was just being friendly, she told herself. Abby returned to her ice cream. Her mind replayed the conversation. Something about the way he had looked at her and smiled made her feel uneasy. 10 minutes passed, and she began to feel comfortable again. The strange encounter faded from her mind. Then, there was another knock at the door. She thought it might be him again. This time, something told her to be cautious. She wasn't sure why, but before opening the door, she decided to lock the chain. When Abby opened the door, the chain caught, preventing it from opening fully. And there he was, the same man from earlier. His eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, he pretended to be friendly again. He stammered a greeting to Abby again and said he just wanted to make sure she was okay. To her, he no longer seemed friendly. He looked desperate, as if realizing he hadn't gotten into the house and was trying to cover it up. Abby gave a quick thank you out of fear and slammed the door shut, her hands trembling as she locked it. She stood there, frozen, staring at the door. Minutes passed, and she couldn't stop thinking about the man. But every sound, every creak of the house made her jump. She needed her mom and wished she were home. Suddenly, she heard the man's voice again, this time coming from the mail slot of the front door. He was whispering through the slot, saying he wanted to come in and had something to tell Abby. Abby froze in place. She screamed, "Leave me alone." The mail slot slammed shut, and then the pounding on the door started. He was banging hard, rattling the doorknob violently, shouting crude words demanding she open the door. She stumbled back, tears streaming down her face, silently praying he wouldn't get in. The banging grew louder, more frantic, as he tried to force the door open. For what felt like an eternity, Abby stood there, sobbing, and then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Perhaps the man had given up and left. She didn't move, only standing there, listening. About 30 minutes later, Abby's mom came home. The door opened, and she rushed in, finding her daughter in tears. Abby told her everything. Her mom immediately called the police about the incident, but they didn't find any trace of the man. As Abby lay in bed that night, she couldn't stop thinking about how lucky she was to have used the door chain. It was a small, almost insignificant decision, but it had saved her. The woman on the 21st floor. It was a few years ago, and I was a technical customer support representative at a company. The night shift had become my routine, an endless cycle of work, going home, eating, resting, and returning to work. Halloween was just a few days away. Our office was bustling, hurriedly decorating for the holiday. As we worked, we exchanged scary stories. There was a story about a ghost named JJ, a boy who haunted the call center at night, but that wasn't the story that unsettled me. Jen, a senior employee, talked about the lady in white, a ghost that appeared on the 21st floor, which was also the top floor of our building. She said the ghost would appear between 3 o'clock and 3:05 a.m. She'd be wearing a white dress, standing at the far north end of the floor, staring out the window. Jen told us there was a very simple rule. If you see her, you must remain silent and still. Don't make a sound or do anything to attract her attention. At the time, we all considered the story to be just a legend, a way to pass the time. But part of me was curious. I loved horror movies and thought it would be fun to see if the story was actually true. It was a Sunday, and I had signed up for an extra shift while everyone else was off for the weekend. At 2:00 a.m., I remembered the story Jen had told me. I didn't really believe in ghosts or anything like that, but I was intrigued. And in reality, I had been watching horror movies and a lot of mystery and supernatural series on Netflix and YouTube. At 3:00 a.m., I felt pretty hungry, so I took the elevator up to the 18th floor to eat. There was a free coffee bar and vending machines there. I filled up my water bottle and took a drink. I was sitting alone in the kitchen area, eating the snacks I had bought. I felt chilly, but it was probably just the weather getting colder, so I wore my blue hoodie with the hood up. While eating, I thought about going up to the 21st floor alone to check if the story about the lady was true. I was really curious. So, I went up to the 21st floor and sat down on a chair with a computer desk nearby, waiting for the woman. It was cold and quiet, so I pulled my hood up and put on my headphones to listen to music. Suddenly, my phone froze. A crackling sound came through my AirPods, a jarring noise that sent chills down my spine. I slowly looked up. There was a figure of a woman, dressed in white. Her back turned to me as she stared out the window. I froze, remembering that if the story were true, I needed to stay silent. But then my AirPods disconnected, and faint music started playing from my phone. I quickly turned it off. Everything happened so fast that I could barely process what was going on. And then, suddenly, the woman's head began to turn, slowly, revealing her pale face, with 4 eyes, smiling a terrifying grin. Terror washed over me, and I crouched down, crawling under the table and across the floor toward the exit. My hands trembled as I moved, praying she wouldn't notice me, that she would just disappear like in the story. And then I managed to get up and run, making it to the elevator. I frantically pressed the button and waited in fear until the elevator finally opened. There was a long hallway leading to the elevator, and as I stepped in, I saw the woman standing at the end of the hallway, staring directly at me. I hit the close button, but then she started crawling toward me. Slowly at first, then faster and faster. She was almost on me, but just then the elevator doors closed, and I collapsed in relief. The elevator reached the ground floor, and I ran out to the parking lot, jumped into my car, and drove away immediately. As I was driving away, I looked up and saw her smiling at me and waving from the 21st floor. I quit and resigned from my position that very day and never went back. It gave me nightmares for weeks. To this day, I still don't know what happened with that woman, and I wonder what would have happened if she had reached me in the elevator. The Pursuer at the Coffee Shop. Hani, a 23-year-old legal assistant, lived a life filled with routine, working at a small law firm, lunch breaks at the local Starbucks, and quiet evenings alone in her apartment. Every weekday at lunch, Hani stopped by the same Starbucks. It was a small, cozy, familiar place, with the usual bustling crowd grabbing their drinks. Behind the counter, Randall, a barista, worked diligently. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Every day, Randall would take Hani's order, remember her name, and write it on her cup. But over time, things began to change. Instead of just her name, he started drawing little hearts over the I in Hani, small gestures most wouldn't notice, but she did. As the weeks passed, the harmless doodles increased. One day, Randall scribbled his phone number beneath her name. Hani felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't interested, but more than that, she felt uncomfortable. She approached the counter, politely and softly rejecting his offer. Randall's face remained expressionless, robotic, as he simply nodded and muttered, "All right." Hanny continued to visit Starbucks, hoping things would go back to normal. The hearts and doodles stopped, and Randall returned to his neutral, professional demeanor. Everything seemed fine until one day, she agreed to meet someone new she had been dating for coffee at the Starbucks she frequented, the same one where Randall worked. When Hanny arrived, her date had already found a table. He politely offered to get coffee, so she stayed behind, waiting. When he returned, he seemed puzzled. He looked toward Randall and said, "The guy at the counter was rude." Hanny glanced over and saw Randall glaring at her and her date, his face twisted in anger. It was the first time she had seen any emotion on his face. Something wasn't right. She could feel his gaze burning into her for the rest of the date, making her feel awkward and uneasy. That night, Hanny returned home, sitting on her couch, trying to shake the uncomfortable feeling, but her mind kept replaying Randall's angry stare. Suddenly, there was a loud, frantic knocking at her door. Hanny cautiously walked to the door, peering through the peephole. Her blood ran cold. Randall was standing outside, his face twisted with fury, pounding on the door. Randall yelled, asking if the man she met was inside with her, his words sounding like a threat. She didn't understand what he was saying. He kept muttering that he knew she and the man were in there, slamming his body against the door, making it shake. Hanny's heart raced. She backed away, rushing into the kitchen to grab a knife, the only means of defense she had. She sprinted into the bathroom, locking herself inside, and dialed 911 with trembling hands. From behind the bathroom door, she could hear Randall pounding on the front door. Her breath caught in her throat as the door began to splinter. She could hear him now moving through her apartment, his heavy, deliberate footsteps. Hanny crouched in the tiny bathroom. It was pitch black, with only a sliver of light coming from under the door. The heavy footsteps, the occasional loud thud as Randall moved around her apartment, made it impossible for her to breathe. Randall moved, knowing she was hiding somewhere. He kicked open doors, searched behind furniture, his frustration growing. He yelled again and again, filled with rage and desperation. "Where are you, Hanny?" She glanced at her phone. The 911 call had been connected, but it was hard to focus. The dispatcher reassured her that the police were on their way, but every second felt like an hour. She couldn't shake the feeling that they wouldn't arrive in time. Randall's footsteps suddenly stopped. He stood just outside the bathroom door, his shadow faintly visible under the gap. Hanny's heart skipped a beat. She knew he was right there. Randall spoke softly, almost sweetly, saying he wouldn't hurt her, that he just wanted to talk. She placed her hand over her mouth, trying to stay silent, but her body trembled uncontrollably. A sudden loud bang rattled the door as Randall pounded on it. Hanny flinched, her back pressed against the cold tiles. The door creaked, but it held firm. His voice began to shout, losing any calmness, boiling over with rage. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying the door would hold until someone arrived. But the pounding continued, relentless, and the wood started to splinter. Red and blue lights flickered off the buildings as police cars sped down the quiet street. The bathroom door was barely holding on. One more hit, and it would collapse. Hanny's mind raced. If the door gave way, there was nowhere else to go. She could hear the distant wail of sirens, but they weren't close enough. She needed to stay calm. The final blow came, and the door flew open. Randall stood there, panting, his eyes wild and unhinged, gripping a small crowbar. He stepped forward, blocking the exit. Hanny gripped the knife, her only line of defense. He started questioning Hanny about why she didn't call him and talked about how she intentionally ignored him and threw him away for someone else. Hanny raised the knife, her hand trembling, her body frozen in fear. Randall stepped closer, his eyes locked on her. The police burst through the front door of the apartment building, guns drawn, rushing up the stairs. The narrow hallway echoed with their hurried footsteps. Just as Randall lunged, Hanny closed her eyes and screamed. But before he could reach her, a loud noise erupted. The front door flew open, and the commanding voices of the police filled the apartment. The police had arrived. Randall froze. His moment of control shattered. He turned, hesitating as if calculating something. Hanny seized the opportunity, thrusting the knife forward in defense, forcing him to step back. Randall stumbled out of the bathroom, his face twisted in fury. But it was too late. The police had entered the apartment, guns aimed at him. He glared at them, the madness in his eyes blazing intensely. He dropped the weapon, the small crowbar clattering to the floor. The officers rushed in, tackling him to the ground and handcuffing him. Throughout the entire process, his eyes never left Hanny. Hanny sat on the couch. Of that night. The nightmare might be over, but the fear would remain, an ever-present shadow in her mind. Night at the gas station, the return. The memory of that snowy night still lingers in my mind. It's been over 2 weeks, and the police are still searching for him. Since then, unease has stayed with me. I've become more cautious, more aware of every detail. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. Light snow fell tonight, and the parking lot was empty. No cars, no customers, only the constant hum of the station lights and the heater struggling to keep the cold at bay. I gazed out the window, just like I had every night since then. I decided to keep busy with the small tasks my manager had left me. Stocking shelves, wiping the counter, anything to keep my mind occupied. As I bent down to organize some snacks, I heard it. A soft creaking sound from the back. It was the same sound I had heard that night, the one that led me to the storage room. I stood up slowly, waiting, listening for more. I told myself it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Just as I began to relax, headlights swept across the parking lot. A car slowly pulled in. It was the same type of SUV again. I froze, watching it stop near the gas pump. I grabbed my coat, knowing I couldn't avoid this. A feeling of dread crept over me as if everything was about to happen again. I stepped outside, the cold wind biting my face as I approached the SUV. I cautiously peered inside. This time, there was someone inside. A man wearing a thick coat, his face partially obscured by a knit hat. I asked, "Do you need help?" The man didn't respond right away. He slowly turned his head, his movements deliberate. Then he spoke in a low, raspy voice. "I am here for what I left behind." Before I could respond, he opened the car door and stepped out. He was tall and moved toward me, and instinctively, I took a step back. I ran inside, slamming the door shut. My fingers fumbled for my phone to call the police. I gasped as I told them, "He's back. The man from before. Please send help." I glanced around, looking for the crowbar I had used before. It was leaning against the wall near the counter. I grabbed it tightly as I heard the man approach the entrance. The door rattled as he tried the handle, but it was locked. Then I heard him move toward the back door. I crept toward the storage room. The back door was still shut, but I knew he was out there. I could hear him moving, his footsteps crunching in the snow. Suddenly, the door handle began to shake. I backed away, gripping the crowbar. The door creaked open slowly, letting in a rush of cold air. I could see his silhouette. It was still him. The scruffy beard, the broad shoulders. His eyes fixed on me, wild and crazed. This time, I didn't wait. I swung the crowbar. He ducked, barely dodging the blow. I swung again, and this time, I hit his arm. He groaned in pain, staggering back, but he didn't fall. Instead, he lunged at me, grabbing the crowbar with a force I didn't expect. The metal slipped from my hands and fell to the ground. I stumbled back. Then I saw my chance the exit, and I ran as fast as I could toward it. I ran outside, the snow crunching beneath my boots. I could hear him behind me. I sprinted toward the forest, needing to get away from him. Branches whipped against my face as I rushed into the woods, the cold biting into my skin, causing sharp pain. I tripped. My foot caught in a tree root hidden beneath the snow. It sapped all the strength out of me. I tried to get up, but before I could move, I felt his hand grab my ankle, pulling me back. I kicked out, sending him staggering with a cry of pain. I got up and kept running toward the edge of the woods. In the distance, I saw the flashing lights of a police car. I collapsed into their arms, gasping for breath, pointing toward the forest. He's still in there. At that moment, he came running out of the woods as the police closed in. For a split second, the crazed smile on his face vanished. He turned to run, but it was too late. The police were right in front of him. He thrashed and squirmed violently as they wrestled him to the ground and cuffed him. The SUV had been towed away, and the man was gone, but the unease remained. The store was quiet again. I walked to the door, staring out at the now empty parking lot. I didn't know why he had come back, what he was after, or what he thought he'd left behind, but I hoped it would be the last time I saw him. Haunting delivery trip. I was working for a food delivery platform on weekends to make some extra money. Between my main job and this side gig, I often felt exhausted. It was past 9 p.m. when I started my shift, picking up small orders and delivering them to random houses. After my first delivery, I drove around the area for a while, waiting for something to come through. 20 minutes passed with nothing. Just as I was about to give up, my phone buzzed with an order for just 1 tacos and a drink. I confirmed the order and headed to the restaurant to pick it up. After grabbing the order, I began the 10-minute drive to the customer's house. It was a normal neighborhood, nothing unusual. As I approached a red light, I noticed a pickup truck stop next to me. Instinctively, I glanced over. The guy in the truck was leaning out of the window, staring straight at my car. I looked away when the light turned green and pressed the gas. I glanced in my rearview mirror. The truck was now in my lane, driving a short distance behind me. As I approached the neighborhood where I was making the delivery, the truck was still behind me. Was he following me? The route was mostly straight, so I wasn't sure if he was just heading in the same direction. I tried to stay calm, but the moment I turned into the neighborhood, I knew. The pickup truck turned in too. Maybe he lived here, I thought. I continued driving through the quiet suburban streets, following the GPS until I reached the final road, a dead end. I braked and parked on the side of the road near the house number I had to deliver to. The truck followed and parked behind me. I sat there, frozen, trying to come up with a plan for the worst-case scenario. What was this guy doing? Was he really following me? I glanced at my phone and saw a message from the customer asking, "When will the food arrive?" Could it be the guy in the truck? Was he the customer waiting for me to step out? I felt more trapped than ever. The man got out of the truck. My heart pounded as I watched him slowly approach my car. He stopped right by my trunk, his face partially hidden in the shadows. Then, out of nowhere, he grabbed something like a metal rod and slammed it into my rear windshield. The glass shattered around me. I screamed and, without thinking, instinctively slammed my foot on the gas. The man jumped onto the back of my car, nearly lying flat as he tried to crawl through the shattered window. I swerved sharply, making a U-turn, and felt him fall off the car. My hands trembled as I maneuvered between the trucks. In the rearview mirror, I saw him stumbling in the street as I sped away. My hands shaking, I picked up the phone to call the police. By the time the police arrived, the man had vanished. All they found were shards of glass scattered across the road. They searched the area, but he was gone. I stood staring at the cracks in my shattered windshield, and memories of the terrifying experience replayed in my mind. I was lucky to have escaped, but deep down I still felt uneasy because he was still out there, run away from strangers. The grocery store sat in the middle of a vast, empty parking lot, bathed in the faint glow of streetlights. It was 2 a.m. The store was closed, and the eerie quiet surrounded it. The night was still, until a soft tapping on the glass echoed in the darkness. I was the night shift manager here. Usually, things were calm, and nothing happened. It was just me, stocking shelves during the quiet hours while the outside world slept. I had been working non-stop since my shift began at 10 p.m., trying to get everything done. My focus was broken when I heard the faint tapping. It was coming from the front of the store. I left my cart and headed toward the sound. Through the large glass windows, I saw him, a man. He was leaning against the glass, trying to peer inside. His clothes were tattered, his face expressionless, with a hollow, vacant look in his eyes. He saw me the moment I came into view. I approached the glass door. I asked him what he wanted. He demanded I open the door. His face was emotionless, no hint of a smile, just cold eyes staring at me. I told him the store was closed and that he couldn't be here. As I turned to walk away, a loud bang startled me. The man's fists were pounding on the glass, over and over, each strike louder and angrier than the last. My heart raced. This guy wasn't just a harmless drifter. I pulled out my phone, showing him I was ready to call the police. Only then did he back off, his eyes still locked on me, filled with rage. Slowly, he stepped back into the shadows of the parking lot. The tension in me eased slightly. He was gone. I put my phone away and tried to focus back on my work. 15 minutes passed. The tapping, the pounding, the man, all of it faded from my mind as I immersed myself in stocking the shelves. But then I heard it, the sound of metal breaking, like something being torn apart. I abandoned the stroller and ran forward, fear rising. My heart sank when I saw the glass door slightly open. The lock, the only thing that kept the door secure, was missing. Fear gripped me as I realized what this meant. I need to go to the office, call the police now. I turned to run for the office, but I froze in place. Standing not far from me, blocking my path, was the man. His expression hadn't changed, still cold, still lifeless, filled with rage. I don't think anything. I just run. I burst through the door, the man right behind me. Suddenly, a beat-up van screeched into view, speeding toward the front of the store. It swerved dangerously, nearly hitting me as it stopped, my heart pounding in my chest. I moved forward, running past the van, but then everything flipped upside down. A sharp pain suddenly exploded at the back of my head. My body lurched forward as I fell to the ground. I didn't even have time to process what had happened before the world started fading. I felt hands grabbing me, roughly lifting me off the cold pavement. My vision blurred, darkness closing in, and the last thing I remembered was the roar of the van's engine and the sensation of being dragged inside. I woke up with a throbbing headache, my wrists tightly bound behind me. The van bounced and swayed as it sped down an unfamiliar road. My mind was foggy, disoriented. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then it all came rushing back. I started to string it together. Man, the truck. Perhaps I was kidnapped by him. My heart raced as I realized I needed to act, and fast. I glanced around. Inside, it was pitch black, but I could make out a pile of old tools, a rusted toolbox, and some scattered metal pieces on the floor. I twisted my wrists, testing the ropes. They were tight, but I could feel a slight give, just enough to give me hope. I could hear the driver muttering to himself up front. His voice was low, angry. This wasn't over. I took a deep breath, calming the panic rising inside me. I needed to think, and I needed to get out. I inched closer to the toolbox, my fingers searching for anything sharp. It was hard, but I found a small, jagged piece of rusted metal. I awkwardly twisted my hands, rubbing the metal against the ropes. My heart pounded with every noise the van made, every bump in the road that might expose me, each one painful enough to make me want to scream. Suddenly, I felt the ropes loosen. A few more scratches and they snapped. My wrists were free, but I couldn't move too quickly. I glanced toward the front seat, where I could see the back of the driver's head. He hadn't realized I was awake yet. I noticed the door latch wasn't locked. I needed a plan. The van slowed as it made a sharp turn onto a dirt road. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Taking a deep breath, I yanked the back door open and jumped into the night. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my body as I tumbled over dirt and gravel. For a second, I thought I wouldn't be able to move, but adrenaline surged through me. I staggered to my feet, running into the thick darkness of the trees. Behind me, the van screeched to a stop. I heard the man shouting, his footsteps pounding as he chased after me, but I didn't look back. I just kept running, my heart hammering in my chest. The trees, the branches, scratched at my skin as I tore through the dense underbrush. My mind was foggy, teetering between fear and survival. I could hear the man crashing through the forest behind me, his breath heavy and furious. I couldn't let him catch me again. Ahead, I spotted a clearing and the faint glow of lights through the trees. A road. If I could get there fast, I'd be safe. I burst out of the woods and onto the road, waving my arms frantically as a car approached. The headlights blinded me, but I didn't care. I needed help. I ran into the middle of the road, screaming for them to stop. The car screeched to a halt, and I collapsed against the hood, gasping for breath. The driver jumped out, shouting something, but I was too exhausted to answer. All I could do was whisper, "Help me." The driver pulled out his phone, calling the police. I glanced back at the man. He stood at the edge of the woods, staring at me with cold, furious eyes. But he didn't come any closer. He knew it was over. The flashing lights of police cars lit up the dark road. Officers surrounded the van. The man already in handcuffs not far away. His face was cold, blank, disturbingly empty. I sat on the curb, still trembling, wrapped in a blanket the police had given me. The world felt strange, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. But I was grateful, lucky to be alive. I was free. The police assured me that he'd be locked away, that he wouldn't hurt anyone else. But the thought still lingered in my mind. What if I hadn't escaped? What if I hadn't been fast enough? As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, I stood by the car, watching the police take the man away. The fear was still there, clinging to the edges of my mind, but I knew I had survived. I had been lucky to survive the night shift. The stranger's chase at Dunkin' Donut. It was just another regular shift at Dunkin', where I work part-time. The night shift is my usual shift, and tonight was no different. We usually close at 9 p.m., and I've grown used to the quiet that settles over the store as night falls. We had to clean up everything, and my coworker hadn't shown up yet. But that wasn't unusual. I was fine handling the store by myself. The inside of this Dunkin' was larger than most, with a few booths and tables scattered around. I had spent the last few hours in silence. No one had come in, and the last customer had left by 8:30 p.m. With only a few minutes left until closing, I walked around as usual, wiping down tables and making sure everything was tidy. As I passed by, heading back to the counter to clean up, something made my heart race. I hadn't noticed him before, but there was a man crouched down, almost hiding in the corner, completely out of sight from behind the counter. Everything seemed to freeze as his eyes locked with mine the moment I saw him. For a second, neither of us moved. The man slowly stood up. He was of average height, skinny, with messy hair and disheveled clothes. I asked him if he was okay, my voice trembling as I tried to stay calm. He didn't respond right away, mumbling that he was fine. I reminded him that we were closing and he needed to leave. He nodded and started walking toward the door. For a moment, I thought everything was fine, but then, without warning, he turned around and sprinted toward the counter with a crazed look on his face. Everything happened so fast. He didn't head for the door. He ran straight behind the counter, his eyes locked on the cash register. I began to realize what was happening. Without hesitation, I made for the exit, my mind racing. I didn't care about the cash register. I just needed to get out. Guys like him are dangerous, and they usually carry weapons. I had to be smart about this. But before I could reach the door, his voice rang out, loud and threatening. He shouted, his voice filled with anger. Stop. Froze for a second, but instinct kicked in, and I kept moving, my heart pounding in my chest. I pushed the door open and ran out, without looking back. I thought he would be inside to rob the store, but I was wrong. He chased after me, running through the parking lot, and fear gripped me like never before. I looked around the area, but most of the stores were dark and closed. I spotted a gas station in the distance, its lights flickering like a beacon of hope. I ran faster, my breath quickening, and he was still behind me. The distance between us seemed to shrink. I burst into the gas station, my chest heaving with each breath. It was the closest place still open. As I ran inside, I shouted for someone to call the police. My voice was panicked and full of fear, echoing through the empty space. The clerk behind the counter and a lone customer turned to look at me. Startled, I ran past them, heading straight for the back of the store. A small restroom sign caught my attention. My fingers fumbled with the lock as I rushed inside. The flickering light in the small restroom, combined with the smell of bleach, heightened my tension. I was shaking uncontrollably. Leaning against the door, I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I reached into my pocket, my hands trembling as I pulled out my phone and called the police. The dispatcher reassured me that officers were on their way, but the minutes felt like hours as I waited. I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, listening for any sign of him. Nothing. The silence was suffocating. Was he following me? Was he out there, lurking? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong and that whatever awaited me outside wasn't over. After what felt like an eternity, I slowly unlocked the bathroom door and peeked outside. The gas station was eerily silent. The cashier was no longer behind the counter, and the customer had disappeared. I cautiously stepped out further. The dim lights cast long shadows over the shelves. I walked carefully, my own footsteps suddenly too loud. My eyes darted to the door, but there was no sign of the man outside. For a brief moment, a wave of relief washed over me. Then I saw him. Through the glass window, his face appeared pale and terrifying. His wild eyes pressed against the glass like something from a nightmare. His eyes locked onto mine, a twisted smile spreading across his face. He smiled grotesquely, almost stretching from ear to ear. Then he breathed onto the glass, writing the word "run." It felt like a challenge, daring me to try escaping. He slowly dragged his finger down the window, the screeching sound sending chills down my spine. He was waiting, like a predator, knowing that eventually I would have to come out. Panic surged within me again. I rushed toward the back exit, hoping it would lead to some way out. As I pushed the door open, I found myself outside again, this time in the alley behind the station. My breath fogged the cold air as I frantically looked around for somewhere to hide. The alley was narrow, with tall brick walls on either side, dark and unwelcoming. A few trash bins lined the path, but it was mostly empty. I had to make a choice. The only way out was forward or back to the gas station, where he might be waiting for me. I didn't have time to think. I started running, my body moving on instinct. As I ran, I glanced over my shoulder, nothing behind me. Still, fear gripped me tightly. This alley too dark, too unknown, leaving me vulnerable to whatever could come. I turned the corner and was met with a dead end. My heart sank as I saw the towering chain link fence blocking my way. I could hear my own breath, ragged and loud, and feel the cold sweat on my skin. Maybe there was no way out. Footsteps echoed behind me. Slow. Maybe he was coming closer. My body froze in place as the sound grew louder, the rhythm unsettling in its calmness. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. My back pressed against the cold brick wall as I realized I had no other choice but to face him. He appeared at the end of the alley, his eyes locked onto mine with that twisted smile. His steps slowed as he moved into the faint light, his shadow stretching unnaturally across the ground. In his hand, he held an iron rod. My heart was pounding in my chest. My legs were shaking. Then he spoke. "You can't run forever." His voice was low, mocking, and dragged the iron bar across the road with screeching sounds. My mind seemed to be spinning. I scanned the alley, desperately searching for anything that could help me. Without thinking, I grabbed a broken brick lying near the trash cans. I knew it wasn't enough to stop him, but I had no other choice. It was all I had. He stopped just inches from me, smirking. "You really think that's going to stop me?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. As he took one more step toward me, I swung the brick with all my strength. In the moment, he was too focused on taunting me. Turning away smugly, I threw the brick, and it hit him square in the head. For a second, everything froze. He staggered back, the smile vanishing from his face as blood trickled down his forehead. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I seized the moment and ran. I didn't look back. All I could think about was getting as far away as possible. The sound of sirens tore through the night air in the distance. The police were coming, but I didn't stop running. Right then, the screech of tires cut through the air as police cars appeared. 3 patrol cars pulled into the gas station, red and blue lights flashing furiously. I could see the officers jump out, guns drawn, moving with urgency. I tried to shout, trembling as I pointed toward the alley. "He's over there." The officer nodded quickly and signaled to the others. They disappeared into the alley, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they shouted commands. The man appeared at the mouth of the alley, running toward the parking lot. But this time he wasn't alone. The police were right behind him. His wild eyes darted in every direction as he desperately searched for a way out, but he was surrounded. The police quickly tackled him to the ground. The man struggled violently, his voice twisted with rage, sending chills down my spine. But now, I was truly safe. The flashing lights of the police cars began to fade as I sat on the cold sidewalk, trying to piece together everything that had happened. It was over, but the horror still lingered. Mysterious masked person. The house was peaceful under the moonlight, and it seemed like it would be a simple summer week without my parents. They trusted me to take care of everything, and so far, I had been enjoying video games, staying up late, every kid's dream. Around 11 o'clock p.m., I was lounging on the couch, absorbed in my game. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from an unknown number popped up on the screen. Hi. I frowned. Who was this? I asked, but the reply came instantly, mixed with irritation and aggression. You don't know who this is? I tried explaining that I had just gotten a new phone and lost my contacts, but the angry messages kept coming. I assumed it was a prank and put my phone on silent, returning to my game. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, but I was startled by a sound, a knock on the bedroom window. At first, I thought I was imagining it. It was late, and I'd been alone for days. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Still, I cautiously moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside. Nothing, just an empty yard. But I knew I'd heard something. I pulled out my phone, intending to call my mom, when I noticed several unread messages from the same unknown number. The last one sent chills down my spine. I'm here. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat louder than the last. I immediately tried to call my mom, but the screen flashed, no signal. No way. We always had good reception here. I ran to the back porch and listened. Maybe, just maybe, someone was crying for help. I had years of self-defense training, and despite the fear surging through me, I was ready to defend myself. This could be a setup, a trick. I grabbed an old baseball bat from the garage and stepped into the backyard. The night was eerily quiet, which made me even more uneasy. I walked toward the edge of the trees, sweeping through the shadows. I shouted into the night, trying to sound confident, demanding who was there and telling them not to mess with me. Suddenly, a flashlight flickered, shining straight at me from deep in the woods. Whoever was holding it was too far for me to see their face, but they were trying to get my attention. The light went out as quickly as it had come on, and the screaming started again, this time more desperate. I slowly made my way toward the spot where the light had appeared. As I got closer to the trees, my heart pounded louder than my footsteps. The woods were dense, with towering trees casting deep shadows. I knew I shouldn't be doing this, but I couldn't stop. I yelled out, asking where the person was. A voice answered from somewhere ahead, a faint whisper saying,
"Here, help me."
I stepped deeper into the woods. My grip tightened around the bat, and my legs felt heavy as I moved forward. I saw a figure. My voice trembled as I asked if it was the person calling for help. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it started moving. In a split second, I realized this wasn't someone tied up. This was someone alive, and they were running toward me. Panic surged through me, and something inside screamed at me to get away to save my life. I didn't know how, but I ran. I slammed the porch door behind me, locking it, then sprinted to my room, slamming the door shut. The knocking started again, first at the front door, then at the window. It was relentless, as if he was trying to break in from every corner. He wasn't playing anymore. He was hunting me. I heard the sound of glass shattering from the living room. My heart raced as I realized he was inside. Footsteps echoed through the house, slow and deliberate. He was looking for me. I hid behind the bedroom door, gripping the bat. I held on so tightly my knuckles turned white. The footsteps grew closer. I could hear his breathing just outside my door. The door creaked open, and I saw the wolf mask peeking out. He cautiously stepped inside, unaware that I was right behind him. In that split second, I swung the bat as hard as I could. It slammed into his head. He collapsed to the ground, and I didn't stop. I swung over and over until I was sure he wouldn't get up. The house was now quiet after the chaos. Inside, everything was still. The intruder in the wolf mask lay motionless on the floor, while I stood over him, panting, hands shaking as I gripped the bloodied bat. I stared down at the man, his body sprawled across the floor. The wolf mask, now cracked, still covered his head, hiding his face. For a moment, I froze, unable to process what I had just done. My phone still had no signal, but I needed help. I needed to get out of there. I rushed to the landline in the kitchen, my hands trembling uncontrollably as I dialed 911. I struggled to find the words, pressing the phone tightly to my ear, trying to calm down. I glanced back at the hallway leading to my bedroom, terrified that the masked man would get up again. The distant sound of sirens broke the silence of the night. Red and blue lights flickered across the walls as the police car stopped in front of the house. Their grim faces approached the door as I shakily opened it. The officers stepped inside, examining the broken glass, the signs of a struggle, and finally, the man lying on the floor. One officer knelt down, checking for a pulse. He said, "You did the right thing," as if he had seen this horror many times before. They told me to sit down and breathe, but I couldn't focus on anything except that mask, the wolf mask. Why? Why did he choose to wear it? The unconscious man was lifted onto a stretcher. His mask still hadn't been removed. My mind was still reeling from the events that had just unfolded. The next morning, I was at the police station. The officers asked me about the man, whether I had ever seen him before. I shook my head, explaining the messages, the strange knocks, and the wolf mask. Then, they told me his name was Thomas, and he had been on the run for years. A detective handed me a file filled with old newspaper clippings and photographs. The story they told me was chilling. Thomas had a disturbing past. Years ago, he had committed a series of home invasions in nearby towns. He would stalk his victims for days, learning their routines before making his move, and he always wore a mask to cover half his face. But it wasn't just any mask. The wolf mask had become his signature. In every report, survivors described the same thing. A tall man in a wolf mask, terrorizing families, always escaping before the police could catch him, until now. The final piece of the mystery was revealed when the detective, now more familiar with Thomas's case, explained why he chose the wolf mask. The detective slid a newspaper article toward me. It had a blurry photo of the wolf mask next to a headline that read, "Wolf Stalker Evades Capture." The detective said the wolf represented a predator, a cunning hunter. Thomas saw himself as the wolf, and his victims were the prey. It terrified me to think about how long he might have been watching me, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He had been toying with me, like a wolf plays with its prey. That night, back home, I sat alone in the living room, the faint hum of the TV filling the silence. My parents wouldn't be leaving me alone for a long time after this. The mystery of why he wore the mask had been solved, but the fear of that night still lingered. I didn't know if I would ever feel truly safe again, but one thing I did know, I would never forget the image of that cracked wolf mask lying on the floor.